Hey everyone, before we get going, if you find the information in this video has helped you or you think it will help someone else, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share with those who are looking for more apologetics with bite, unaffected by the twitteries of niceness culture. Don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified when new videos drop, and be sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X for more insights and to potentially chat with me on a live panel. If you're one of those who disagrees with what I brought up, or just to generally want to do something other than hate watch finally, scan the QR code and send me an email to get a discussion set up. And now, without further ado...
Well, that was something. Yes, I know, it's another Trinity debate. Here's the issue. A lot of people are under the impression, especially those who are more Protestant, tend to think of the Bible as a univocal text. The problem is that anyone who actually reads the text honestly knows that univocality isn't really a thing within biblical scholarship or even just lay biblical study. Anyone who tries to claim that the Bible is univocal is inserting something that just isn't there. And that's ultimately what turned this Trinity debate into a concept around univocality, because in order to make the Trinity work, you have to justify univocality. Of course, we had a special guest come on to help address a few things, and, I'd say you did a pretty good job with this first part.
Hello. How are you doing, Project?
Hello. How you guys doing?
Doing all right.
All right.
Just for TikTok purposes, are you over 18?
I'm 50.
All right, right on. And are you also a Latter-day Saint, or are you another religion?
No, you guys might recognize my username. I kind of chastise you guys a little bit sometimes, but I'm a typical Bible-believing Christian. I guess I go to a non-denominational church, probably out of some of the Calvary movement or whatever, but just
Okay, so
consider
Reformed
myself
Baptist.
Bible-believing. Yep.
Cool. All right, so I got 3 prompts up here. One, declaring both the Bible and the Book of Mormon to be the Word of God. The Bible as far as it's translated correctly. Second, the Trinity not being biblical. And third, the original church fell into apostasy and is now restored. So, is there any one of those that you want to tackle?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Because all 3 are bunk. I would say
We'll see.
I think I'll lean into the Trinity a little bit, but I think I want to start by saying I listened to this sad commentary about the God being one as we are Christ, Jesus, and all that. Because I actually am going to come to an agreement that I believe that particular verse isn't the best Trinitarian, proof verse at all. Because I think I do agree that it is more talking about oneness with God's plan and heart and intention and everything else. I don't think it's talking specifically in that verse about his nature. Jesus Christ being... So I will, in my knowledge, I'll just leave it at that. But
Okay.
when I think about the Trinity, I see it very clearly, and it's kind of funny. And then just a little quick side note about my interpretation, and kind of shock and amazement when I was growing up at my age. The Trinity and understanding it seemed to be pretty kind of natural. It wasn't something like the creeds were. I didn't even know what the creeds were until I was much older, and the creeds weren't preached in church. The Word of God was preached in just a very clear manner, and the nature of Christ and God and stuff just seemed to make sense. Now, of course, when I got older and understood that, okay, wait a minute, it's both. Sorry, lost my train of thought reading something over here from work. The nature of God is clear all throughout the Old Testament, and then Christ comes along as the promised Messiah. Isaiah, solidifying everything that Christ would be, including God with us and all those things. And I think that there's plenty of verses in the Old Testament testifying to the fact that there is literally just one God. He knows no other. He is unique in nature and purpose and divinity, and all the other gods are not only not real, they've never been formed, nor any will be formed after him. So I take those scriptures not as just hyperbole or Jewish poetry, like I know Latter-day Saints like to argue, but I would say, if you're starting from the standpoint,
where would you get the indication that they are not like Jewish poetry and that they're not more symbolic and that they aren't simply
because
speaking to the people of Israel?
They're not just speaking to a flowery version of this is the only God you need to worry about, ignore the other gods that we acknowledge exist. I don't believe that's the way it's written, nor do I believe that the other gods
Well, where would you get that indication based on what the text says? Because when I read the text, I get the exact opposite.
Oh, of course you do, because you guys have your own
Latter-day
Saint interpretation of it.
Well, no, it's not just me, and it's not just Latter-day Saints. Biblical scholars would come to that conclusion as well.
Well, I know there are plenty of biblical scholars. You can point to some. I can point to some.
Okay, so like for instance, I would point to the late Michael Heiser, and he would say that. Well, that's just one example off the top of my head, right? I don't know why you have a problem with Michael Heiser. He's an evangelical.
Because he's a Trinitarian. You guys always bring up Michael Heiser, and he's a Trinitarian, and you won't acknowledge it.
And the fact we do acknowledge it. That's the issue. We do acknowledge it. But even then, he acknowledges that as far as the scholarship is concerned, appealing to, for instance, Isaiah 43, 44, 45, and 46, without the added context of what it's surrounded by in Isaiah 40 through 49, is completely antithetical to what Isaiah is writing about and writing to. So when we try to isolate and proof text these verses into meaning something that isn't within the context itself, sure, we can make it mean whatever the hell we want it to mean.
Well, see, that's what I find somewhat contradictory about the Mormon position. Back to your first prompt there about it's the word of God unless it's translated correctly. So you seem to love to find verses and point to exactly what it says based on these interpretations. This is exactly what it says. But then when the verses can be easily interpreted the other way, you like to bash it and say, well, it's not really translated correctly, and we've lost many plain and precious truths.
Okay, so Project, where did I say anything about whether or not it was translated correctly? I'm talking about the context. I'm talking about proof texting versus overall context of the actual chapter. I'm not talking about whether or not it's translated correctly.
Well, because I don't have those verses memorized, so you'll have to remind me of what exactly those Isaiah verses are talking. I'm talking about 43:10 and the others around it.
Yeah,
right?
and you know, like 43:10 is within the broader context of what is called the trial of the gods, when Isaiah is, writing to all of the tribes of Israel prior to the Assyrian invasion, and speaking on behalf of the Lord, getting after them for going after the gods of other nations, to the point where they're fashioning idols, where they're creating idols in order to worship those gods, when that's not how worship was done in that time. If they wanted to go worship those gods, they needed to be in those lands.
But let me
drive the point home first, Project, because the way that this was understood, like you remember with the story of Naaman and Elisha. What did Naaman do after he was healed?
You'll have to remind me. I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, this is in 2 Kings chapter 5. So basically, what he did is he took 2 donkeys full of dirt from Israel, so that way he could worship the God of Israel on Israel's land. The way that it was understood is that the God of Israel could not be worshipped anywhere else but where Israel was determined to be. That's why he took the dirt with him, so he could worship him in Israel, because it was Israel's dirt.
Fine. I will acknowledge that there were some traditions and the cultural understanding of these lands and that lands, and there was political divisions, and they associated their
why didn't
God
Elisha
and their
correct him in
land.
saying that he could worship him without the dirt? Why didn't Elisha correct him?
I couldn't begin to tell you, because that's just,
Because that
you have
was
to
the way that it was
understand that
done.
you have to understand that the Bible is as descriptive as anything. It's not necessarily prescriptive. So when these things are discussed and
This would be
talked
a
about,
descriptive thing, wouldn't it?
say that again.
So Naaman taking 2 donkeys worth of dirt back to his land in order to worship the God of Israel, and he could only do it while on that dirt. Why didn't Elisha correct him? That would have been descriptive, wouldn't it?
No, because you're assuming that it needs to be corrected. Maybe it's just his
Why wouldn't
culture
it need to be
of
corrected if your
obedience.
Jesus is correct?
Are
Why wouldn't it
you
need to be
saying
corrected?
that because he did that was what was proper? Are you saying because he took dirt?
That was the order that was given. Yes, because that was the order that was given. Because the God of Israel, Yahweh, could only be worshipped on Israel's land.
But that's ridiculous, because you're saying that somehow that was the biblical interpretation of needing to worship their own God, because he was limited by land.
Yes,
but he wasn't. God has never been limited by land.
Okay, Yahweh was. Prior to him being given dominion over the entire earth, he absolutely was.
Oh, BS.
In fact, if we look at what the Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, say, Yahweh was given Israel after they were divided according to the number of the sons of God. Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls indicate that there were more than one son of God, and that Yahweh was only one of them.
I'm not. Which part of Dead Sea Scrolls are you even talking about? Which book? I'm not even familiar with that.
Yeah, so this would have been in Deuteronomy 32. So, like, if we look at the Masoretic text and what many are looking at it now, so like if you look at the King James version, it would say that the children of Israel were divided up according to the sons of Israel. But that text didn't exist until the Middle Ages. But in the Qumran scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls, as they're sometimes called, Deuteronomy 32, and this is just one example of the textual variants that are there, says that instead of the B'nai Israel, it's the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, indicating that God has more than one son.
Well, you're putting authority in a textual variant, so I find that kind of strange. But I think the interpretation
available. Project, this is not interpretation. This is not simply a textual variant. This is the oldest text that we currently have available.
Again, you're saying that the older you go, the more authoritative it is.
The more accurate it will be.
Even though the Latter-day Saints
position, that's exactly what I'm saying.
The Latter-day Saints position is so contradictory in the sense that the older we go, we find multiple gods, and we find all these traditions, and we find all this stuff that is where God was actually found. But our newer revelation is sending us back to the earlier stuff, even though the newer revelation of the prophets all the way up until the last prophet before Christ, they solidified one God. And the biblical history, the history of Israel is one God.
Hold on, project. One how? Because I think we can both agree that English is a very reductive language. And so if we were to look at, is it not? Is English not a reductive language?
I find no reduction. I find no poetic interpretation.
Okay.
The solid Isaiah 43:10 is so blunt because even within the context of who he was speaking to, the history of it, it was solidifying
here's
the single nature of God.
So again, here's the problem. Again, you have to divorce it from the context because he's speaking to Israel, not to the other nations, first and foremost. Secondly, when I ask how are we defining one, okay, that's a very important thing. It's kind of the same thing that I asked the previous guest. One how? Because in English, one can mean many different things, but in things like, say,
again, I am not going to go into the one.
Let me finish. Yeah, no, this is important. It's important because to the one, understanding what one is and what one we are referring to it's actually very important to understanding the context of what is being written. So, for instance, and I brought this up with the previous guest, I don't know if you saw or if you heard, but in Hebrew, I can think of several different words, but the two that come to mind would be Ehad and Yahid. We see Ehad being referenced in Deuteronomy 6 with the Shema, but we also see it in every other instance talking about a relational one. This is not talking about like an ontological singular being. That would
I'm
be
not
Yahid.
talking about one. I'm not arguing the word one.
Well, can I ask something? Wait. Can I address something real quickly? Project, why are you against the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls if they're older? This isn't an issue for Latter-day Saints because yes,
I'm not against them. I understand them in the full interpretation or the full plethora of wonderful knowledge to consider
but you're giving more
interpreting.
But you're giving more authority to the older text than the. So which one has more authority? The older one that's closer to the original in time, or the older one that is furthest away from the original manuscript? Which one has more authority?
I personally can't make that determination. I'm just saying that I think it would be completely justifiable to say that the older one that we have found might be the original or close to the original. But you also have to find out, okay, at what point was it changed and for what reason and everything else. So there's a question. My back to the point. My point is there is no other God. I know no other. No God is formed before me, nor will there be a God formed after me. That's not a question of one.
Hold on, Project. No, if you're saying that the Dead Sea Scrolls has more authority, then you can't go and say that because the Dead Sea Scrolls contradicts what you're saying.
I didn't say they have more authority. I don't believe they have more authority. No, I said the opposite. I think the Bible has authority.
What do you think the Dead Sea Scrolls
are? Which Bible?
Well, I know the Dead Sea Scrolls have lots of the Bible. It really verified a lot of Isaiah as being very, very accurate.
It really didn't.
What year was the Dead Sea Scrolls written in?
I believe that they think they were around 100 BC or so, right?
They go back to about 400. Some of them go back to about 400 BC.
Sure, that's fine.
So what? Once again, you're saying that there's more authority in the modern and older texts than the older, closer to the manuscript texts. Do you agree that the Dead Sea Scrolls would have more authority since they're closer to the original than the Masoretic text?
I think it's ridiculous to argue this because I'm not even arguing about the point that you made about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No. The reason why they're brought up is determining whether or not something is more accurate. Would you say that the Dead Sea Scrolls are more accurate than the Masoretic text?
I am not an authority to make that judgment.
That doesn't matter.
To the original texts.
If they're older and there are more versions or more verification that says that was first than what we have, I think it's definitely something that could be taken into consideration in overall biblical studies. But I can guarantee you that does not allow you to change thousands of years of history confirming the concept through all the rest of the Bible and all the other writings that there is one God.
Okay. Here's the problem.
And a guy named Rock and a hat can't change all that.
Project. One how? Because that's the question that we asked before we got derailed again. One how?
We're back to one.
Really quick, Project. I understand where you're coming from, but again, one God. I agree with you that there is one God. Jesus Christ agrees with you that there is one God. Where are you inferring or exegeting from? No, sorry, not inferring. Where are you reading out of the text that there are three persons to this one God?
Okay, so I start with the fact that I believe that the biblical text says that there is one God.
You're starting with a presupposition, not the text itself. Okay, got it.
Well, sure, you can call it whatever. You can argue that. I already know all your arguments, and I understand it. I respect it. But
Wait. I'm still wondering. You still haven't answered my question. One how?
I think one in being and one in purpose, but there are different verses referencing both in being and in purpose.
Okay. How would that have been understood by the first century church? Where would we go to a single author? Because keep in mind, the biblical text was not compiled until the 4th century.
You're going down a rabbit hole,
author,
dude. You're going down a rabbit hole trying to manipulate.
How is this a rabbit hole? No, I'm not. How is this a rabbit hole?
Because you
again,
keep
we're trying to go into the understanding of what it is.
You're shifting to all these other concepts of what were they thinking back in the day, and what did this verse actually mean in the context of all these other verses. In order to understand
what is being written, you have to.
Well, I understand that, but my point is, you asked me the question about why I think that we can see the Trinity, and I've yet to be able to get through that because you keep just hopping on other LDS arguments.
Okay, so bring that up and let's see if it actually goes into the context. Because what you brought up as far as what it says in Isaiah does not bring the context. So
you haven't let me finish. You haven't let me even get a full sentence in.
I absolutely have. We can go back and I can clip this entire thing. In fact, I'm probably going to post this entire conversation on YouTube. But,
Sweet.
Go ahead. Go ahead and make the claim.
My most simplistic, and I will say this is the simplistic. I know it gets more complicated. I know your arguments against said verses, your proof text versus my proof texts. The point is, there is one God, and the nature of the Jewish religion and everything towards the coming of the Messiah is clear that they believed in one God. They were appalled at Christ's words about being before Abraham, I am. They were appalled at all these things that they wanted to stone him for blasphemy, for calling himself equal with God. They already knew there was one God. So when he said, I am God, basically, they were appalled. They tore their clothes. They were so mad that they killed him because of that very claim. This concept of multiple gods. Here's the last thing I'll say. This concept of multiple gods makes your God so puny because he has no power over nature or energy.
Really quick.
All right, you've got a lot enough.
We're diverting from the original.
So you still have yet to bring up anything in the text to justify your claim. So what within the text would justify your claim?
John 1:1 is perfect.
No, it's not. But okay.
I believe it to be so. It's very plain.
So, hold on.
In the beginning was God.
Wait. Hold on. Wait. So John, you claim to know our arguments here. So what would be our argument against John 1:1?
You guys try and manipulate what it means to be was God and was with God. You try and separate.
Okay. How so? What would be our tactic for that?
If I remember correctly, you even dive into Dan McClellan has a classic crap version of that.
No. Let's keep the language down here. I apologize.
I would say. Correct me if I'm wrong. I seem to remember hearing stuff about like the movement of the comma and the preposition versus the subject versus whatever.
1 John 5:7 and 8. That's more an argument against 1 John 5:7 and 8. That's not talking about John 1:1.
Okay.
So there, I think you're confusing the two. But even then, I wouldn't appeal to Dan McClellan at all. I think the guy's a moron.
Right. He's a little Marxist for me.
Yeah. But anyway, no, what I would say is that when we actually look at the Greek, I would say that it completely obliterates the Trinitarian concept out of the water. Because there are two separate subjects there. You know, there's the Logos and then there's Ton Theon.
Right.
And those are two separate entities. These are two separate subjects. And so if we were to transliterate it from the Greek to the English, it would read, in the beginning was the Son, and the Son was toward the God, and the Son was also divine.
Right. But there are hundreds, if not thousands of biblical scholars for 2,000 years that would completely disagree with that because
Not really,
divine,
because in order to make it work, you have to implement Caldwell's rule. So in order to make John 1:1 work within the Trinitarian concept, you'd have to implement something called Caldwell's rule, which didn't exist until the 1930s. And it would make the rest of the Greek text unreadable, if you were to apply it equally.
Well, kudos to your biblical scholarly lingo. I think I understand, but my point is, there's a reason why so many translations, English Bibles, simply say God, he was, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and he was with God. Because
they're trying to justify a
no. It's
tradition
because
that
they
didn't
already understood
exist
there's
until
one
200
God.
years later.
By saying that Christ is divine, you're then automatically creating assuming, especially under the LDS framework, you're assuming a second
No, it's not
deity.
the LDS framework. Because again, like this is the thing. Because that's exactly what it would be. Especially with the revelations, like not like prophetic revelations, but what has been shown through the Qumranic texts, that there were multiple divine entities. In fact, they believed in the divine council in the ancient world. They didn't become intolerant monotheists until after Babylon.
Really quick,
Yeah,
one of the arguments that, like, with the whole John 1:1, I think it's really crappy because, again, where's the Holy Spirit mentioned? Where's the Father mentioned? So it would just be
you're demanding from the text that isn't necessary when it comes to understanding the full breadth of God's nature.
It actually is, because if you're going to make the claim that a concept is found within X, you're going to have to show where the aspects of the concept or aspects of your beliefs are found within X. If you're going to say that the Trinity is biblical, you need to show where the concept of the Trinity is found within the biblical text. And if you're going to say John 1:1 is showing the Trinity, well, then you need to show.
I wouldn't argue that John 1:1 is the only text. It's just a part of the full canvas.
So now you're presupposing univocality in the text.
No. I don't have to
that's
talk about univocality.
That actually absolutely is. You have to presuppose univocality, and that slides in the face of the historical narrative.
You guys argue univocality to justify your argument against the Trinity.
Okay,
that's how you interpret off of all these.
How do we argue univocality here, Project? Because again, you're assuming things and have not
because you prove text in the opposite way. You dive into the language.
No, project. These are not interpretations that we make. These are scholarship interpretations. These are understandings of historicity. We are accepting their historicity. That's all we're doing with the text.
I'm sure you think that, but there's
Project. Wait. Project.
That would disagree.
Where did I prove text? Where did I prove text? Specifically, where did I prove text?
You spent a heck of a lot of time on the whole one thing with the last people.
Yeah,
talking about that as being this is what the language says. This is what it says.
What do you think proof texting is? What do you think proof texting is, Project?
Project, we can't be proof texting in the opposite direction, because if we were proof texting in the opposite direction, that would mean that we're claiming something and we would require all of the text in order to support it. But the reason we don't find the Trinity as it's articulated in the creeds in the biblical texts is because I don't find it in Genesis, I don't find it in Exodus, and so on, and I can go through each individual text and no one author ever describes it. So if you can show me any author in the biblical text who identifies and explains the Trinity in their text,
in no way, shape, or form has any Christian ever claimed that's how the Trinity came to be.
Again, that's the problem. That's
the
problem.
What
you're doing.
Well,
that's why you're proof texting.
No, you're claiming, though, the opposite. You're claiming that the Bible says the opposite by proving pointing to Scripture.
Hold on, wait, Travis, wait.
The Bible saying the opposite is, again, as Lion was just indicating, that is claiming univocality. I am saying Revelation doesn't prove it, and Romans doesn't prove it, and Galatians doesn't prove it. And I can go through each independent text, and no author of any text identifies this consubstantial 3 persons in one being Trinity. Nobody.
Well, that's your argument, but we have we do see see the full breadth of complete within the context of who wrote it,
univocality. Univocality.
You gotta let me finish talking, dudes. You got 3 on 1, man.
Wait. Wait. I'm still wanting an answer to my question.
Good
What is
Lord.
proof texting? What is proof texting, Paul?
Proof texting is like pulling a verse out and claiming that it means everything you think it means, and then pointing to a one way over here out in another book that claims something and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever. I understand what
that's
proof
not proof
texting is.
No, there is no blah, blah, blah.
No. Proof texting is in order to support my theology, I have to have A, B, C, and D. I find A in this text, B in that text, C in this text, and D in that text. That's proof texting. That means that no one author explains A, B, C, and D. I am asking you to provide the author in the biblical texts without claiming univocality. Like, does Paul teach the Trinity? And does Paul teach it?
I would say yes, in the sense that they are.
Where does Paul teach the Trinity?
I would say, as a whole, he does in understanding that there's God the Father and Christ the Son, and they are one, and all the other stuff.
No, he doesn't. He never ever identifies any such unity.
You're asking for something that doesn't. You're asking for something that doesn't exist.
I am asking you, right? That's right. The Trinity doesn't exist.
No, you're asking for a verse style or a verse. You want a Book of Mormon revelation straight from God type mentality.
I want Paul to have taught his congregations the Trinity, and I want him to have clarified it in the written documents that you're saying demonstrate it. I'm wanting you to do what you claim the biblical texts do, but you just identified that is unreasonable for me to expect that Paul actually clearly taught the doctrine that you claim Paul espoused.
You can't call it a smoking gun verse. It doesn't exist in biblical scholarship.
It's not a verse. I don't even need a verse. I need Paul to have taught the Trinity. Where does he identify that? Why does he even identify that Jesus is co-equal with God, the Father? He doesn't even do that.
And that's not the point of the gospel.
God is the Father. God is the Father of us all. Jesus is the Lord and his Son. That's what Paul identifies, and that's basically it. That's his whole theology. He doesn't say that Jesus is God and Jesus is co-equal
but it's also
with
coming.
God.
You have to acknowledge that it's coming from a framework that they already understood there was one God.
No, now that is an argument from silence.
That is an argument from history and scholarship.
No, it's not. That's an argument from silence.
No, so you're assuming that the Jews back in the 1st and 2nd century and 3rd century,
Jews didn't believe in the Trinity.
They didn't believe in one God. They believed in a council of many.
No. Now
you have to dive into LDS framework to separate.
I'm not.
Christ and God.
No. And I'll show it. I'll demonstrate it very simply. It is overwhelmingly understood by biblical scholars that Jesus never himself claims to be God. That is a claim that is made about him by the New Testament authors, but Jesus never claims, I am God, ever. He claims, I'm the Son of God, I was sent by God, I bear God's name, I bear God's authority, I bear God's power, but I am not God. He doesn't claim that for himself.
But again, you just said it. Because they already understood there was one God.
No.
And if he's coming out and he's saying that I have his name and his authority and his power,
so does Jesus.
Therefore he is God. You just put two and two together.
That doesn't make a Trinity.
It makes it clear that there is one God and one Son that testifies to God.
No.
Yes.
No.
If there's
No, what it
one
does is
God
it
and
makes
he
clear-
is this
no,
guy
again,
with this attribute,
Stop. No, that's
Jesus
not what it
Christ comes
does.
along and says,
No.
I have the same
Oh,
That's
you're
not
attributes.
what he's saying.
you're
No, he's
introducing
not.
your own
You are
presuppositions here,
adding.
dude.
You are introducing concepts I did not identify. Jesus is not claiming I have attributes. He is claiming my Father is greater than me. I have a separate and independent will from the Father. I am less than the Father. I am lower than the Father. I am subordinate to the Father. I do the Father's will. He's not claiming equality with God. He's claiming he's the Son of God, but he's not claiming equality with God. And in addition to that, the other issue is Jesus is claiming that he worships his God, which is the same God we should worship. But yet you're claiming what? That Jesus taught the Trinity? Or that anybody understood the Trinity? Because believing that there is one God in Israel does not teach the Trinity.
You'd have to be
Yes,
able to
respond to
showcase
that.
that the Jews believed in the Trinity too in order to make your claim work.
Now, don't get me wrong. The way that the guest was ultimately handling the concept of the Bible not being univocal was a bit head-scratching, to say the least. But things only get spicier from here. Stay tuned for the next part.